Hey everybody, this is Dan,
And this is Ron.
and this is a nominee questionable movies.
Welcome, everyone.
And today we have a guest, a friend of the show who you may be familiar with if you've been one of our many diehard listeners. But for those who aren't, would you like to introduce yourself?
Hey everyone, my name is Matt Cornell, and I'm in Berlin now, but used to be one of the programmers of Cinema of the Damned in Amsterdam.
And today we're talking about the 1984 sitcom "It's Your Move," featuring a very, very young Jason Bateman and a very, very young Adam Sadowsky.
Hey, before we get into it, can I just put out one shout out?
Okay.
All right, this is a shout out to Ludilka, our avid listener and friend out in, I think he's in Russia. Is that right?
I believe so. Yeah. And he's been commenting. We've been having a good time. So,
hey, Ludilka.
Yeah, Ludilka, however you pronounce it. Great to have you.
And on that note, it's your move.
Yeah. Well, just to be clear, because Dan said a very, very young Jason Bateman, which made him sound like Jail Bateman, but he was actually 16.
Oh, he was 16? Okay.
16 playing 14, right?
A sophomore in high school. I guess it would be like 15 or 14. Yeah.
So Matt, you're the friend of the pod. You're here as our guest. Would you like to describe the show?
So It's Your Move is a show about a teenage sociopath. That would be my best, my quippiest explanation. It's about a teenager in suburban Southern California who lives with his widowed mother and his sister, who's a cheerleader. The character's name is Matt, and he's a schemer. He's basically like a con artist or like some kind of future financial guy, right? Kind of has a genius for numbers and is always working different scams at his high school. And the premise is basically that I guess his father had died sometime previous to when the show starts, and his mother is dating, and a neighbor moves in across the hall who is this guy Norman, who is a penniless writer from Chicago, and Norman is interested in Matt's mom, and the show revolves around this rivalry between Matt and Norman. And basically what we learn over time is that Norman is not just this sensitive writer guy, he's also kind of a grown-up version of Matt. He's also kind of a schemer. And so the title, It's Your Move, it refers to their gamesmanship. They're always trying to best each other through a series of pranks and manipulations. How'd I do?
That was great.
It took under 30 minutes. So That's better than I ever did.
And I have to say, if you watch this show, you're gonna laugh.
How do people watch this show, Ron?
Well, I found out it is actually legally available now. It is on Fubo. It is insanely, it's like $65 a month because I think it's one of those things that comes with the cable package, but it is legally streaming.
Oh, nice. I mean, yeah, that's how we watched it.
There's a few episodes up on YouTube.
What was that?
There's a few episodes up on YouTube.
Yeah. And then we subscribed to Fubo and watched it. So that was great. Yeah. So Matt and I actually, we watched it when it first came on. Although it was only several years later that we realized that we were both big fans of the show, because it wasn't even a full season. It was 18 episodes. Jason Bateman was originally on Silver Spoons, and then he left and they did this show, which it was originally conceived as the same character moving on. But then they, for one reason or another, they decided to make it a similar character, but not the same person. So this show only lasted a short time, and then Valerie Harper's show came on, and he played the older brother on that show for a long while. So, but this is the hidden gem.
Well, one thing that's interesting too is that in Silver Spoons, his character is kind of similar to the one that he ends up developing here.
Yeah.
And the one that actually becomes his defining character in all of his work, which is this sort of insincere, smug kind of schemer. Yeah.
Though he doesn't always say in Silver Spoons and in It's Your Move, he was wearing that on his sleeve, right? That was very clear that that's what he was like. I think in the other shows, he comes off as more sympathetic, but still being the same person.
Yeah. And so it's funny that you mentioned that, like, it only aired for one season. It was a flop, but it actually had some, like, critics liked it, and I remember that my parents watched it, so it wasn't like it wasn't totally unknown. But I think it was in prime time, competing with Dynasty, so it had some tough competition, or maybe it was just like that's a good counter programming strategy, since probably not the same audience.
Right. I didn't watch Dynasty. I remember I used to watch it with my sister. And neither of us watched Dynasty. There was only one TV in the household, and thankfully no one was into soaps.
Yeah.
Daytime or primetime. Yeah. Matt, would you like to describe one song from the show? Not what about the show?
Oh, you want to go there? I like, obviously, like,
you want to go there?
Oh, absolutely.
Are you guys going
to? It just seems a little premature, outside? You know.
Oh, we can talk about it later.
We're throwing everyone into the deep end here, but that's fine. Well, so there's a lot of these characters who are side characters in the show, because mostly it's about Norman and Matt. But Matt's sidekick, or toady, if you will, is this guy named Eli. Who was played by Adam Sadowsky, who I don't think did any acting after that. And
he had one part in 3 O'Clock High.
Okay.
Yeah, but that's
he plays like plays the character Eli, who is stereotypically fat and dumb and loves to eat and is horny for Matt's sister. And this is obviously a kind of negative stereotype. And growing up as a fat kid, like, I had a complicated relationship to Eli, because I thought he was very funny and the performance is very funny, and yet it is it is mean spirited, but the whole show is mean spirited. I think we should be very clear about that. And also, I would say, and even though a lot of people think, well, irony as a pop culture gesture really begins in the 90s, I think already in this show we see that the character of Eli is sort of ironically stereotypical, right? Like, or that, at least that's the way I take it, is the show is already like trading in types. The mom is almost like comically, clueless. The sister is kind of over the top, bitchy cheerleader. So there's like, they're already these kind of cookie cutter characters, which then the creators of the show will go on to do Married with Children, which is like, taking this even further,
Right.
And I think here it works because, like, because each episode is basically structured as a classical farce, give or take. And so you use the types and the stereotypes as a shorthand to get rid of exposition so that you can go directly into the action. Most of the show is very fast paced relative to a lot of sitcoms from that era.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So what Eli is this character who's sort of used by Matt as a pawn in the game of It's Your Move. But like my friends and I, we love this show, and I had a band in high school and later college, and we did a song called Eli is God. We used samples from It's Your Move in the song. I don't know. Are you going to put that in this episode? Are you going to put the song?
I could. I have it. Should I put on the whole?
Good, yeah. I mean, we know the rights holder.
Yeah. But it's this song kind of, turning Eli, and it's called Eli's God, and it's just turning him into this figure of worship. And years later, no longer in a band or in college or anything, Ron and I tracked down Adam Sadowsky, who plays Eli. And I think he was a tech worker at that point.
Yep. He was in tech.
Yeah. And he agreed to meet us at a bar in San Francisco. And I think he was both really happy to meet fans of the show, and also maybe a little bit disturbed by our level of interest.
Yeah. And the song. I think he was a little weirded out by the song.
The song is a little weird. Yeah.
And,
It's kind of, it's a little homoerotic. But this is also like in rewatching the show recently, the homoeroticism is also in the show.
Oh yeah.
So, so yeah.
I think Eli is kind of the foil, because like Norman's the foil to Matt, and then Eli is the foil to Matt's mother. I think, in that they have similar relationships. Like he has a similar relationship to both of them. There is this kind of weird sexual undertone to it, right? Because like at the end of the day, it's a show about a guy like basically who's like completely paranoid about somebody sleeping with his mother.
Yeah, and not just he's not just worried about his mom sleeping with someone. It's he doesn't want her to sleep with a poor man, right? Because also what you have in this character of Matt, the Jason Bateman character, is like he's sort of like a worst case scenario Alex P. Keaton, right? He's like, we can assume he's like a young Republican, but he's sort of cynical in his politics anyways. And he's really just all about making money. So he doesn't respect Norman because he's a penniless writer.
Yeah.
And again, the show like doesn't make Norman any more sympathetic. It actually makes Norman himself kind of a moocher who's like mooching off the mom. And so nobody in this show is at all likable. And that being said, Eli's kind of likable when he's not perving on Matt's sister.
Yeah, when he does that, I remember there's one episode in particular in which, so he's normally pervy and then he finds out something about her. And she's actually for once being like, not only supportive of him, but she was using him for support.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, she got kicked off the cheerleading squad and he's like, I don't like you anymore.
Yeah, and it's like, no, that's not Eli. Don't do that. Don't do that. Eli is not that, Eli is not that kind of a shitty guy. So
no, and we learn interesting things about Eli in this show. Like there's the Christmas episode where we find out that Eli is going to visit his grandmother who's in prison.
Yeah.
Because we never get a sense of like Eli is just as Dan pointed out.
It's like almost implied he doesn't have parents.
Yeah. Yeah, he's like an orphan or something, and he's just sort of always seems to be hanging around.
Like Matt's mom specifically buys groceries for Eli, and it's implied that this is a long-standing arrangement.
Right, and we actually do get that because I know with Matt being a sociopath and all that, and Eli being a toady, we do occasionally get a little glimpse in which that Matt actually really cares about Eli, and it all started. They've been friends since I think maybe kindergarten. Except when some kids were beating up on Eli and he came in to save him. He describes him, I think he describes him as a blob, and then he realizes that it's not a blob, it's Eli or something like that. So he's nasty about it. Like he looks down on Eli, but at the same time really caring for him. I'm not sure what to make of that.
Well, I think on some level, like Matt understands that like Eli is the only person who is going to accept Matt for who he is.
Yeah.
Yeah, actually, if I think
to his mother, he can't show his real self to really anybody.
I think if I had to think about it, like I knew a kid like Matt when growing up, and I think that the show is like the relationship between Matt and Eli is actually pretty honest to certain kinds of like adolescent male friendships, in the sense that there probably was some level of like disrespect, but he also kind of they're also still weirdly close. Like that kid that I was talking about, he was like this really kind of obnoxious kid, but he was just like part of my friend group, and I don't think he particularly liked me. I was like the fat kid, the nerd in his group, but I remember I also had the VCR. So he would let me come and hang out at his house if I could bring the VCR over. Right. And in retrospect, you could be like, well, he was a horrible kid or whatever, but I think it's like kids don't have like a very well developed moral compass yet, right? Like, and I think what's interesting about this show is that this is basically a completely unsentimental idea of a teenage show, right? Like, I mean, I was being a little provocative in saying that Matt is a sociopath, but let's just put it this way: he's not a conventional character at all, conventional protagonist, right?
Mhm.
He's completely manipulative and unlikable, and yet somehow it sort of makes sense.
And like in terms of structuring comedy, like if you have, there can be an advantage in having no sympathetic characters because then you can do awful things to them and the audience doesn't feel bad for them.
Yeah, yeah, and maybe we should talk about this because my memory of the show was that Matt doesn't seem to have any. I mean, well, this would be the measure of a sociopath, right? He doesn't have a conscience. He doesn't feel guilt. But then I think it's like episode 6 or 7, where maybe even later, where Matt is spying on his sister with like recording equipment, like surveillance equipment, and he overhears her like saying that she loves him, and then he gets this like look on his face, like of like he's stricken with conscience and he's moved, and then he like unplugs the device, like it's like, I'm not going to spy on her anymore.
Oh, just saying, that was episode 5, Pajama Party.
Yeah.
And I think before that in the scene too, we get a lot of interesting because there's not a lot of background information. It's a pretty narrowly focused, like we're either in the apartment building where Norman and Matt live, or we're at the high school. I don't think there's ever another set besides like when they get stuck on that train. And yeah, and the other kids in the high school that are with his sister, they hate his guts. They're like talking about like, oh my God, that little creep.
Right.
He sucks. You know, so
Yeah.
there's some ambiguity, I think, in that scene too, where it's like, okay, like a sociopath, usually they're going to have, there's going to be some degree of narcissism there. So he might just be feeling the fact that like she defended his ego, and it's never really clear.
Yeah. It's definitely a weird way to end, because it's like, it doesn't end on a joke. It doesn't end on a like story point. It just ends with Matt like showing some sort of emotional complexity. And it's probably the chink in the armor that led to this show finally like getting dragged down by moral critics. Right?
Right.
Do you want to talk about what happened with this show, Ron?
Yeah.
You were the one who told me.
It's everything that we're describing is what it's like up to episode 14. Is that where you're getting at?
Yeah.
So there ended up being a lot of complaints from parents because their 14-year-olds started trying to emulate Matt and his con games. So they changed the direction of the show. In episode 14, Caught in the Act, Matt's mom catches Matt in the act, and then she catches Norman in the act. And in the following episode, it's no longer Matt conning, going back and forth with Norman and conning everyone and getting to each other and undermining their cons. It becomes a little bit more of a standard sitcom, and it doesn't even focus on Matt anymore. There's a couple of episodes in which we just see him a little bit.
Yeah, he's basically grounded.
Yeah.
For the rest of it's weird. He's kind of grounded for the rest of the series.
Yeah, and
like
it's
they
not so much
refer to it at different points.
Yeah, and it's not like he's suddenly a really nice guy or something. And I think at least one of them, he sort of helps with the con, but he's not conning Norman or anyone in the family. He helps them achieve something. I don't even remember.
It's playing the stock market.
Yes.
Oh yeah, the principal. Yeah, they're what is it? They put all their money in Swedish kronars or something.
Right, but like
Swiss francs.
That also kind of works, because like you would expect that in real life, a person like Matt, his sort of like, his untamed id would lead to all these crazy schemes and stuff, and eventually get him in trouble with his mom. And then he would sort of basically find the more socially acceptable version of this sociopathy, which would be becoming a stockbroker or some kind of finance guy. So it's safe to assume that he like goes on to work on Wall Street or become like a junk bond salesman, or maybe even Bernie Madoff. He seems like he could end up being like a Bernie Madoff, right? Someone who's literally just stealing people's money with some.
He'd be selling NFTs right now.
For sure.
Do you think he could be the kind of person that like is a financial genius that launders money for drug cartels?
I think that would be a very realistic development for the character.
Okay, yeah, that's really interesting.
And do you think, like, as a byproduct of him laundering money for drug cartels, he might have this weird Smurf blue tint to his face all the time, every time you ever saw him again?
All right, I feel like you're leading me to point out that he's in this show on Netflix called Ozark, which is just finishing its 4th season. I think it's in the middle of its 4th and final season right now. And yeah, I mean, basically the character that Jason Bateman plays in Ozark feels like Matt, like this sort of well, the youthful kind of like provocativeness is gone, but like the financial genius is there, and so is also the scheming and the smugness. Yeah, I mean, he's basically in Ozark, he's basically laundering money for the mob, and then his business partner's been stealing or something, so he hatches like some sort of scheme to prevent them from murdering it. It involves like moving to the Ozarks and starting a bunch of phony businesses and laundering a lot of money for the mob. And you really see that this character that he started even as early as Silver Spoons and really honed in It's Your Move, it's like it's really there in Ozark, although like instead of Eli, he's got a bunch of like rednecks that he's sort of manipulating, but it kind of tracks, right? Because you can kind of see like someone like Matt would have ended up going to university and probably a business major, and he would have joined a frat, and he always would have been like he was in that show where none of those kids particularly like him, but they all rely on him because he's a financial genius, right?
He would be the treasurer in a frat.
Yeah, like I think they would all talk about him behind his back, which is what we see in the the slumber party episode, right? Like people are always going to talk about him behind his back because he's kind of a freak and he's not very likable, and yet they will all like rely on him to deal with their money.
Right.
That's kind of an interesting thing because in It's Your Move, of course, he's kind of a ladies' man, and he's kind of he's got a little bit of swagger or something, but what we come to discover is that no, he's fundamentally he's a kind of a nerd, like someone who's basically more interested in like numbers and schemes.
Yeah, and then somehow like Ozark was more than 30 years later with 10 times the budget, and it looks uglier than It's Your Move somehow.
Okay, this is the Great Tint. Yeah.
I just need to get that out because I watched all of it in the last week, partially to prepare for this, or at least that was my excuse. I was using to binge television, and just it's so ugly. Oh my god,
yeah,
it's so ugly. But okay, that's.
So what you're saying is that binge watching 18 episodes of It's Your Move just wasn't enough for you. You had to watch 4 years of Ozark.
Yep.
All right. Well, but we're leaving out probably a crucial step, which is that he plays a character that's sort of related to these two in Arrested Development,
right?
Michael Bluth, right? And you've made the case that it's a variation on this character.
Well, so like the performance that Bateman is giving in Ozark, the mannerisms, the haircut, the way he dresses, the vocal delivery, it's, especially as the show goes on, it's indistinguishable from the performance he gave as Michael Bluth, even though like the character, I think, has a bit more self-awareness than Michael Bluth did.
He's grown up.
Yeah, I guess so. Yeah, like in Ozark, he sort of realizes like, okay, all this is crappy. Whereas like in Arrested Development, he's sort of like, oh, okay, I'm doing the best thing for my son, or I'm keeping the family together or whatever. And in Ozark, he's just sort of like, yeah, I fucked up.
So if you think Ozark looks ugly, how would you describe the visual, like the aesthetics of It's Your Move?
It's Your Move. It looks very much like a mid 80s sitcom. It was shot on video. You have the colors look kind of washed out because colors would usually look more vivid on a CRT than they would on a modern display.
Yeah.
So there's like a brightness kind of boost that was coming from the television that's not going to come through in, watching it on a TV now. Yeah, I mean it's pretty standard as far as I can tell. There's like some visual gags, but in terms of the set design and the costumes and everything, there's not anything that's that out of the ordinary that I could say.
Except maybe for the kind of Baroque hallway of the apartment building.
Oh yeah, the hallway. Yeah, and that really weird decoration at the end of the hallway.
Yeah.
Right. There's like a tiki head or something at the end of it.
Yeah, some kind of Aboriginal art or something, along with like a lot of plants and stuff. I mean, I definitely have been in apartment buildings like this in Southern California where the common areas have a little bit of a flair, but it really stands out here.
But I mean, otherwise, it's another show about people in an apartment that has a stereo with no speakers connected to it.
No, we figured out what the speaker was.
Oh yeah, in Matt's apartment, in Norman's apartment, there's just a very nice stereo with nothing connected to it as far as we could tell.
Yeah.
I just want to, for the audience at home, just have to point out that's maybe one of the first thing that Dan noted and was looking for it. And then I kept looking, I was caught up on that and I kept looking for the speaker. So I was hung up on it too.
Like, I think there's one shot okay, The Simpsons has the opposite problem where when they cut away to like, you're looking from inside the house to the front yard, there are speakers, but there's no stereo that they're hooked up to.
This is really what the show revolved around, the speakers and the lack thereof.
That's a pet peeve I have. But yeah, I think like, the apartment building's definitely, the apartment hallway is the most impressive set, I think, or most interesting set on the show.
And they spend time in there. It's not
they spend a lot of time in there, yeah.
I mean, in general, we're talking about a very low budget, right? So and it's funny because the sort of low budget aesthetic or something, it's also thematized in the show. So like we haven't yet talked about the most famous episodes in the show. Which are also like, we could have easily talked about it in relation to music, right? Because I don't think my high school band was the only rock band influenced by the show. Because the show, I think, is kind of well known, like among people who are also into like metal music and rock music and stuff. Because the two episodes that happen somewhere in the late middle of the show, like 14th and 15th or something episode.
It's the 12th and 13th because the 14th is when the
okay. Interesting. So they reach their apex with this 2 episodes, and that's when they kill the show. Like basically, that's when they like cut off Matt's power because he's getting too big.
Yeah.
So yeah, it basically this is the Dregs of Humanity story, and it basically what happens is Matt is supposedly in charge of finding a band for like the high school dance, and like I don't know how they came up with the money, but it's all like the students' money. And it was put in a bank account, but then Eli lost the bank book, and then he put the checking account number or something on a bulletin board. The point is that Eli lost all the money, and Matt has to produce a band for the dance. And what they come up with is they drag some skeletons from the science class, and they put them in like heavy metal clothes, and they have a fog machine. And then they get a tape of a band, a rock band, and then they like Eli is attached to the skeletons with ropes, with his arms and legs. So he's like animating them with a fog machine going. And of course, because this show is completely like fantastical, like everyone buys it, and the band becomes a huge success.
Right.
And like I think what's really charming about like the Dregs of Humanity thing is, first of all, it's just like a brilliant like scheme, to just make a band that is not real people, right? Because of course that did happen later in music.
That took that took more than 20 years for the Gorillaz to show up.
Yeah, there's the Gorillaz. There's also like I I've seen this band in San Francisco called Captured by Robots, where there's one guy and then the robots play the rest of the music. But this is also like a scam. It's like, there is no band. And it's pretty brilliant. And I think part of what makes it charming is seeing Eli like backstage attached to these ropes, just like, like
Right.
like a puppeteer, right?
Yeah.
And it's also funny because one of the details that we learn is that Eli is a heavy metal fan, and of course he doesn't look like a heavy metal guy. And Matt kind of implies, well, you can live out your dreams of, So there's also this kind of like thing where he's like a puppeteer, and he gets to live out his fantasy of being a heavy metal guy. And of course, in probably the weirdest part of this episode, like Matt's sister develops a crush on the lead singer or something. And Matt arranges for Eli to put on the singer's glove and then like hide behind a doorway so that she basically ends up like kissing the glove or something. It's totally.
She kisses the glove. Well, she gets, I think there's the gloves that she manages to pull off.
Yeah.
So she keeps the glove, but doesn't she kiss the other glove and he keeps that glove or something like that?
Something like that, yeah.
Yeah. But the bottom line is that, of course, the Dregs of Humanity are like a huge success. And then Matt, of course, just doubles down on it. He's like, he accepts a $20,000 gig at the Palladium in Hollywood. And then Norman wants to interview them for Rolling Stone. And it's the most ambitious thing they do on the show because it takes up 2 episodes.
Mm-hmm.
And it's arguably like, sort of, it would have been hard for them to top it,
Oh yeah, that's definitely the peak of the show because you got the ensembles working on like all cylinders. They're comfortable with each other at that point. The writers, that's probably the best concept for an episode I think they came up with, and it just keeps escalating until like, and I think like my personal favorite scene is at the end with the when Matt's getting interviewed on music TV and the interviewer is pretending like she knew the members of the band.
Yeah, Nina Blackwood. Yeah.
Who was an MTV VJ, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and it's this very cynical thing that, of course, we've seen in other movies and TV, right? Where there's some kind of hoax, and other people claim other people are revealed to be liars because they claim.
Oh yeah, I mean Chris Benoit.
Right.
There was that whole because he like murdered his family, and then they the WWF, or they were known as the WWF then, I think they put on this like 2-hour tribute special because they only knew that he was dead, and then like 3/4 of the way through they were like, oh wait no, okay, and then they just shelved it. And because like they were just talking about how nice the guy was, and it turned out he like killed his wife and kids.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, at least they shelved it there. With the Dregs of Humanity, obviously nobody. I mean, the Dregs of Humanity, I think, are better people than Chris Benoit was, obviously. But
there's also like JT Leroy, who was this, basically fake persona, like a trans HIV positive sex worker who turned out to be a middle-aged straight woman who like created this persona to like basically sell her writing. And she had someone go out and play the character in public, and the person like wore a wig and like adopted these mannerisms and tried to like basically recreate the voice that this woman Laura Albert was using on the phone, right? And then of course befriended people, right? And there's still some question to this day, like, were these people in on it? Did these people suspect anything? And many of them were had, obviously. But it would have been interesting if they had done like a longer cycle with Dregs of Humanity, because it would be interesting if like Norman, because Norman's career at some point is going to take off because he interviewed them. It would have been interesting if if he had been even further like invested in keeping the story alive, right? But instead they get threatened with lawsuits because there's all these people claiming that the Dregs trashed a hotel or got a woman pregnant, So eventually they decide to kill him off, right? By staging a car accident.
And there is one more punchline at in a later episode, like the last or second to last episode, in which Matt is reading the paper and he holds up the paper in front of him, and we see the headline "Dregs of Humanity to be inducted into the Music Hall of Fame." So
Right.
we don't see it, but
Yeah.
the Dregs of Humanity actually continues in the music world.
Yeah, and I think like there's a band called Dregs of Humanity, and I'm pretty sure even people that didn't watch this whole series like we did, I think that these episodes are well known. I think like they're the only ones that are on YouTube.
Okay.
There's a few others, but yeah, they're by far the easiest episodes to find.
Yeah. Yeah. And again, this is also where Eli kind of transitions from being like just an object of, of mockery. And he sort of, he gets into his own a little bit. And I guess, Ron, you remember Sadowsky telling a story about how the writers kind of like started to like give him more interesting stuff to do.
Yeah. They it sounded like they felt some sympathy for him, that because they were all writing him as the dumb fat kid, and they're like, well, let's
And that tracks, because like the episode right after Matt's mom finds out is entirely an Eli episode.
Right. And Eli actually wins.
Yeah.
Something good happens to him. Eli does something, and something good happens to him. That's he's still the dumb fat kid, but he's the dumb fat kid that we know has heart and we care for him. He's not just a toady. He becomes more than a toady.
Yeah. And by the last episode, they've got him being Alfred Hitchcock in their like sort of faux Alfred Hitchcock Presents mystery episode. Yeah.
The episode isn't very good, but I think I always thought that the Alfred Hitchcock thing was hilarious. So.
Well, I think what's clear is that like these people were pretty experimental. This show stands out because the characters are not likable. Matt is a very unconventional protagonist, and then they do some formal experimentation, right? They breaking the fourth wall and all this kind of stuff. And maybe it's a little bit of a sort of rough draft for what they do with Married with Children, which did break through. But which I don't like nearly as much, but it's definitely a lot of the same kind of things. Like, what if we do a sitcom that's totally within quotation marks, right? Like none of the characters are likable. We're just, pointing to the conventions of the genre, basically.
Well, and I think there's a lot from the Phil Silvers show in here too. The Bilko, Sergeant Bilko.
Okay.
Matt is Sergeant Bilko. Eli is Private Doberman. At least that dynamic is very much like the dynamic between Bilko and Doberman is very much the Matt Eli dynamic. But that's the only like precursor I can think of, and that was canceled at least like 20 years before this was on. But it was on its syndication, so it's like the writers would have been familiar, I think, with the Phil Silvers show.
Yeah. And then a little bit of context. Phil Silvers played a sergeant in the military, and he's constantly got all these schemes. I don't think there's some conning going on, but he's always got all these money making.
Oh yeah. He's always got a scheme. Yeah, there's like the episode where the IRS wants to audit him, so he creates like 20 boxes worth of fake documents.
Well, thank you for giving context for anyone under 60.
Yeah, exactly.
I'm the oldest person on this show right now.
When it comes to classic TV, you might be. Well, the other connection to Married with Children that we didn't mention, besides the creative team, Levitt and Moy, is David Garrison, who plays Norman on this show, and he plays the neighbor on Married with Children too.
He plays the neighbor on both shows.
Plays the neighbor, but on that show, he's more like the sensitive guy who's constantly getting picked on by Al Bundy, I guess. If I remember, it's a long time since I've seen Married with Children, but he's much more like sympathetic, whereas here he's a twerp.
In the same way that there was that outcry from parents about their kids emulating Matt, there was a big outcry, and it changed the direction of the show. Married with Children, there was also this big outcry. There was, I can't remember her name. It was
Case
all
the Gall.
What was that? No. So there was a big outcry over Married with Children and about, well, just how awful it was, how awful the people were and how awful that was. And I can't remember the name of the person. There was one person who was sort of at the center and leading this fight against the show. And I can't remember. I think they were trying to get it off the air altogether. So, but Married with Children stayed strong. It was around for a very long time.
Well, and I think Married with Children was this was this on ABC or NBC?
Fox. No, this
No,
one.
no, it's your move.
I think it was NBC.
Okay, yeah. So NBC in 1984 is in like a completely different place than Fox was in 1990. So Fox was basically like, it was just a network of syndicated channels at that point. And so they're just doing anything they can to get attention. So they were happy about the controversy.
Right.
And they were more than happy to pile a bunch of resources into it versus like, like NBC, they had, they weren't at that point in their existence. Cause like every network, I think, besides like when network TV first started, and you can kind of see this with the early years of Netflix, they're going to do like more experimental, crazy stuff because they need to get attention.
Yeah.
And then once they've solidified their position, they're just usually going to turn out kind of generic crap, which is kind of what Netflix has been doing for a while. I mean, there's like some good stuff, but the vast majority of what I've seen on Netflix after like BoJack Horseman has not been particularly good. Maybe that's a hot take. I don't know.
I don't know. I'm trying to think of.
They're not taking as many risks as they did early on.
Yeah.
Same thing with Fox. You know, like Fox now versus Fox in 1990. They're two completely different things.
Yeah, Fox had The Simpsons, the Tracy Ullman Show,
right,
and some really weird stuff. Like I think Herman's Head was on.
It's Gary Shandling's show aired on Fox. It would show on Showtime, and then the last two seasons, I think, then it would show in an edited version on Fox.
Okay.
I found the name of the person that led the boycott or tried to lead a boycott against Married with Children, Terry Rakolta, who lived in the same town as I did when I lived in Michigan. So when I was watching, well, I wasn't really watching the show that much. I wasn't into Married with Children that much. Other stuff on Fox like Simpsons and Tracy Ullman. But anyways, yeah, just a little tidbit there. My neighbor tried to boycott Married with Children.
Yeah, we should probably also mention that in rewatching the show, I didn't catch it, of course, when I was young because it wasn't relevant. But like in rewatching the show, there's some famous people that turn up in It's Your Move.
Oh yeah.
So River Phoenix is in the pilot. Like,
doesn't even say a word. He's just sitting there. There's like 5 or 6 kids there, and he's just happens to be there.
Right, and then Jason Bateman's sister, Justine Bateman, is in the episode. I think this is before she was on, what is it, Facts of Life?
No, not Facts of Life. The Alex P. Keaton one.
Right. Okay. Family Ties.
Family Ties.
Yeah. Which was funny because then her brother in that show is very similar in a lot of ways, right?
Yeah.
And then Christy Swanson, and also Shawnee Smith. Yeah. And then one of my favorite small characters in the show is the landlord, Ernie Donatelli.
Yeah.
No, Mr. Donatelli. The actor's name is
Ernie Sabella.
Ernie Sabella, right? And we found this guy on Cameo, and we thought that he's the It's Your Move guy. It's not even on his bio.
Ernie Sabella is the voice of Pumbaa in The Lion King and The Lion King 2 and The Lion King 83, and apparently there's a lot of things associated with the original Lion King.
This is where I show my age. I've never seen The Lion King, and
What?
Ernie Sabella is the guy, the landlord from It's Your Move for me.
Yeah.
So I'm just a degenerate Gen Xer.
And in cameo,
I'm a degenerexer.
in his cameo intro, he's holding a big stuffed plushie of Pumbaa. He really identifies with that. So.
I mean, a disappointment for me.
Well, also he's like getting like $200 for 2 minutes or something.
Yeah. I mean, as an It's Your Move fan, it's a little sad for me that his career was successful in the end, because I can't afford his cameo.
Right.
But yeah.
And we reached out to, or we were going to reach out to a guest for the show today, beyond Matt, but unfortunately, there was a tragedy.
Yeah, we were trying. We were hoping that we would. We were hoping to reach out to Adam Sadowsky again after 20 years later and see if he wants to come on. But he passed away this past August, which is that's unfortunate. So Eli is no more, except in our hearts and minds. Yeah. So
and so Jason Bateman is, of course, like pretty famous. I don't know about the other people here. Karen Kay, who plays the mom. I don't know what else she's done, and Trisha Cast plays Angela, the sister. So I don't recognize a lot of these people anymore.
Oh, she went on to be she was a regular on a soap afterwards.
Okay.
Young and the Restless or something like that. Oh, there we go. There she is. She was on Santa Barbara for a while, and then she was in The Young and the Restless for about on and off for about 10, 15 years. And actually really recently she came back as a guest star.
Yeah.
So she's known, well, we know her as the sister on It's Your Move, but most people, if they recognize her, it'd be from Young and the Restless. But it doesn't count.
It looks like Karen Kay mostly did television after this. 21 Jump Street, Mr. Belvedere, Fantasy Island.
Yeah.
So this was really mostly Bateman's show.
Yeah.
Great.
My contention is that he's really working out his character that he's going to reemerge with in Arrested Development and Ozark.
Right. And I think it's sort of interesting. There was never any home video release of this at all, ever. Like even after Arrested Development you would have thought like there would be like a Warner Archive style thing at least.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, it has a little cult. As far as I know, it has a cult following because it wasn't just me and my band in high school. There was.
There's not really a lot of music you would have to license, if any. Yeah, so I guess if you're like a boutique DVD label, put this out.
Yeah, Shout Factory, get on this one.
Yeah, like even Mill Creek, like this is like prime Mill Creek material.
Yeah, I mean even Cop Rock got a Blu-ray. Come on.
Did it really?
Yeah.
Wow. That's a little scary.
That'll be our next one season wonder.
Matt, did you watch Cop Rock when it came out?
I mean, I think I watched a couple when it aired. Like, but no, like in retrospect, I wish I had. We did curate a television musical episode night at Cinema of the Damned, and I showed a number of scenes from Cop Rock, and that was fun because the main event there was the Buffy the Vampire Slayer musical episode.
Okay.
But then afterwards before we did an hour of musical episodes, scenes from musical episodes. So Xena, the Warrior Princess, actually had a couple of musical episodes. Of course, Cop Rock, there's tons of stuff. Oz had a musical episode that was really bizarre. So yeah, it's rich territory because musicals are already weird. Musicals are already weird, but it's especially weird to take a show that you're used to seeing as a non-musical and then turn it into one.
Right.
Yeah. Especially if it's set in a prison.
Right.
Yeah, the Oz musical episode, that could be an episode unto itself, I think. That was just so freaking weird.
Yeah.
Like I was binging Oz right when the lockdown started. I was like, okay, the best way to figure out how to deal with this lockdown is to watch a bunch of dudes in prison, right? And that probably wasn't the right move.
Yeah.
And now I'm living in a different zip code.
It was your
I don't
move.
think because of Oz, but yeah, it was my move. Yeah.
I think like if I had to wonder like why this show had a fascination for me, it's precisely there's some kind of like adolescent power fantasy in this show because Matt is smarter than every adult.
Oh yeah.
And it's sort of the premise is basically that he's already an adult, right? And he's already smarter than and more capable than, so it's not until they finally clip his wings, like late in the series, where we see him as a kid again, basically. So I think that's what makes it kind of singular, is that it's like the child as the adult, and the adults are really kind of diminished in this worldview, right? It's a little bit how like we take the Peanuts for adults, basically, except for the few times that we actually hear an adult voice, right?
Right.
And Charlie Brown already plays with that ambiguity by basically having male pattern baldness, right?
Right. Yeah.
Like, how old is this character?
Well, and I think with this show too, like the adult world, everything is kind of dog eat dog.
Yeah.
Like what Matt does is it feels excusable within the logic of the show, because it seems like if he doesn't do that, some bigger shark is going to eat him or something, to mix animal metaphors.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I guess, do you have any memories, like specific memories of watching this when it was on?
No, not really. I mean, I just remember, I think I videotaped it and I recorded it for sure to rewatch it. And I know that my parents liked it, because when I mentioned that I was doing this podcast, my mom was like, yeah, that was a good show. And I was like, oh, that's weird. I'd forgotten that my parents knew this show, but it aired in prime time, right? And I probably rediscovered it in syndication, like on cable, like much later,
Yeah, I think it was showing it was in syndication on the USA network for a while.
Okay. Yeah, USA was definitely a big chunk of my early 20s, late teens. USA was definitely most valuable player.
Oh yeah, that's like when Night Flight and stuff was on, right?
Yeah, they also had USA Up All Night with Gilbert Gottfried, where he would host like a double feature of bad movies, exploitation movies.
And Rhonda Shears.
Rhonda Shears, yeah, right. Yeah. So you guys actually did Dregs of Humanity is playing in Berlin tonight. So I got to go in a few minutes here.
All right. I heard that I heard they still got it.
Yeah. Actually, this is their comeback tour.
All right. Well, you'll have to report back. So until next time, well, actually, probably well past next time. But for now, I'm Dan.
And I'm Ron.
I'm Matt.
There we go. That's what we were waiting for.
So,
I wasn't sure if you were waiting for that, but I said
it was your move, Matt.
Right, exactly. A voice in my head. It's your move.
All right. Have fun. Take care.
Take care, everyone. And here's Eli's God. You're gonna laugh.